Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
All right, I think we have to start because it's already 9 a.m. in the morning. So we start. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Our topic today is years of crisis. Sometimes it's called a 20 years crisis. It mostly discuss about the historical context after the end of the First World War or after the end of the Great War. What's the condition look like, especially the peace settlement after the Germans defeated? And what's the reaction, as well as some kind of issues the last 20 years after the end of the Great War. It's very important because at that time, especially after the end of the First World War, some people were inspired by liberal theory of international relations. They are very optimistic view that the Great War was the end of all wars. We'll believe in peace. There will no be another war after that. But in fact, the hope was false because it was entering another crisis in world politics. So from 1919 until 1939, around 20 years, we call it the 20 years crisis. What is all about? Let's see first the context of the era after the end of the Great War. So after nearly the war ended in 1919, a conference was convened, try to solve a kind of peace treaty in Paris, in the Palace of Versailles. So the name of the palace is Versailles, and then next the treaty called the Treaty of Versailles because it was in the Palace of Versailles. It was in outskirts of Paris city. The delegate in the conference, peace conference, 32 countries, and the Allied power, the victor of the war, struggle to solve the conflicting aim. Really, there are not only one treaty, but there are several treaties. But one of the most important is here at Versailles Treaty. Yeah, and in the Versailles Treaty, the decision were mostly hammered out by the Big Four. Yeah, the Big Four is the country who are the winner in the war, consists of several leaders, from the United States, represented by the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, and France, George Clemenceau of France, and David George of Great Britain, and Vittorio Orlandi from Italy. At that time, in the beginning, Russia was not represented because, as we have discussed last week, that Russia quitted from the war because of internal problems, because of revolution in Moscow. And neither were Germany and its ally not invited in the beginning. But in the treaty, of course, they come, but it's not because Germany and its ally was the loser, yeah? So there's no voice at all in the conference. And very important at that conference, we discuss about what we call the Wilson Plan for Peace. Wilson, as mentioned before, is the US president. He tried to draw up a series of peace proposal, and the name is 14 point because he have 14 point, 1 until 14. But the point he proposed, among others, is first, he tried to end any secret treaties, because secret treaties is treaty signed very secretly, so it's very dangerous for the peace. So try to open diplomacy, the liberal idea of President Wilson, and freedom of the seas. At the time, remember that German used unlimited submarine warfare, and it shoot and sunk ships from the civilian ship of the US. So America won freedom of the sea, free trades, it's liberal trading order, and reduced national army and navy. And another 14 point is a session for the changing border and creating a new nation. So it's based on self-determination, especially in the southern part of Europe, where the area conquered by Austro-Hungary, President Wilson's idea about self-determination, so they get independence. Not for the rest of the world, actually, mostly still in Europe, the idea of self-determination. And he also proposed a General Association of Nations and create a League of Nations. This is the idea of Wilson, of President Wilson. All countries, great and small alike, they join in one international organization called League of Nations. This is the plan for from President Wilson. Okay, let's see the treaty. The treaty actually a treaty because it was signed in the Palace of Versailles. The name is Versailles Treaty. And initially, of course, there's conflict between Britain and the US. Britain and France are actually very concerned about its security because he's very afraid of Germany. And finally, the conflict between the US and France is overcome, and the treaty, they reach compromise, and the treaty Versailles is finally ended, signed by Germany and Allied forces, Allied power. And the treaty is important here, is the creation of League of Nations. Okay, what's the point of the treaty? The treaty Versailles, basically, in a sense, the treaty punished Germany. Yeah, Germany was responsible for the First World War. So Germany lost substantial territory. Germany has colony in Africa and Pacific. It lost to the Allied forces. And also, Germany put a severe restriction on its military. So the number of the army is limited. And in Japanese, word is like di pretelli. So the Germany, because it was the loser, so they have to agree in very bad term. The military, its territory, it was punished, and all the responsibility for the war was on Germany's shoulder. Germany was responsible, including they have to pay reparation. Reparation, because you are responsible for the war and you have to pay. So Germany has a lot of burden after the war. It's very important here that all German territory in Africa and Pacific was declared, become a mandate. Mandate actually is kind of form of colonization, because at the time the name is mandate because this area is not ready for independence, so they sit administered by the League of Nations. And this is the important point of the Treaty of Versailles. And very important, after the end of the Great War, or the end of the First World War, there also the creation of new nation in Europe. It's very interesting if you see the map. Unfortunately, I don't put the map of Europe after the First World War. So the Western powers, actually, they also signed many treaty with the defeated countries. And they have separate agreement between also Hungary and Ottoman Empire. But okay, let's see about after the treaty with the defeated nation. Austro-Hungary, because defeated, the area then collapsed, and the new nation from Austro-Hungarian Empire emerged. Austria and Hungary formally united and become separate countries, Austria and Hungary. As well as Czechoslovakia, Czechoslovakia is under Austro-Hungarian Empire, become independent. Czechoslovakia. And now, after the end of the Cold War, it become separate country, Czech and Slovak, Czechia and Slovak. But it was it emerged after the First World War. And Yugoslavia, I mentioned Yugoslavia, is mostly a Slavic nation under the Serbian. Serbia is the most powerful country at the time. And united, Yugoslavia, Yugo means south, Slav means Slavic. So the Slavic nation in the south of Europe, so they named Yugoslavia. This new nation after the First World War. And how about Ottoman Empire? I think last week there's a question about what's the fate of Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire also collapsed, and the only territory they maintain is only modern Turkey. Modern Turkey. This is the rest. They have to struggle to maintain the Turkish countries under the leaders called, his name is Kemal Atatürk, or Kemal Pasha. But all of the territory of Ottoman Empire lost to the Western powers, such as, in Middle East. Back to the history about the conflict in the First World War. In the First World War, the Arab people, they asked to support the British and French to defeat the Ottoman Empire, because they say Ottoman Empire is not Arabs. You have to defeat your enemy. That's Turkey, and I'll give you independence. That's what British and French say. But in fact, after the war, the promise is not fulfilled, because Palestine, Iraq, and Transjordan was put under British control. Yeah, mandate. It's colony. Yeah. So after the end of the First World War, the area Palestine, Iraq, and Transjordan, no Jordan, yeah, it's under British control. Yeah, we talk about the story of Israel and Palestine, starting from here, because at that time the British invited Jewish people to come to Palestine and then establish country in Palestine, become Israel. This started from here because of the defeat of Ottoman Empire. And Syria, Sham, yeah, in Arabic they say, Syria and Lebanon, actually the Sham under the France. And Russia suffered very great loss. Many areas like Romania, Poland get independence from Russia. Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, actually formerly part of Russia, become independent. So Russia lost many land, and the country became independent, like Estonia, Latvia, or Baltic country. Yeah, Lithuania is Baltic region. So this new nation emerged after the First World War. So a little bit like modern, yeah. So the map, if you see the map, they will change after the Great War. Many change, yeah, after the end of the war. But initially, actually, the peace built on quicksand. Basically, this kind of very pessimistic view about that. The peace treaty after the end of the First War, actually, many problems, especially in the US. Even US sponsored the peace treaty, but American disagree, yeah? Americans disagree. Wilson at home at the US, many people say, well, United States, no need to take part in the in the European affairs, stay out of European affairs. Remember the doctrine of Monroe Doctrine. That's why the US quit from the politics in Europe, and the US itself is not member of the League of Nations. Yeah, they create a League of Nations, but the US not a member of League of Nations. There's problems. And also, let's see about Germany. Yeah, let's see what the fate of Germany. Germany was very disappointed after the end of the Great War. Legacy of bitterness and hatred in the heart of German people, because you know Germany was punished by the UK and France, Britain and USA. They have to pay the reparation, they lost territory. So you can imagine that Germany was angry. Yeah, why we have to surrender like this, you know, shameful treaty for Germany. And also, actually, there are many people in Asia and Africa, they hope they got independent, but they are now become under the European powers, the colony. The European put the name mandate system, but actually this kind of European colonization in Middle East. Yeah, as I mentioned, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq was under British, and France, they colonized Lebanon and Syria. And also other story about Japan and Italy. Japan is disappointed, actually. They hope they can get more territory, but they fail, including Italy. Italy also joined the British and France, but they gain less than they wanted. So actually they try to get more land, but they are disappointed. Why I only got a very small land? Because Yugoslavia got independence. Should be some of the area part of Italy, but they got independence, become Yugoslavia. So that's why two countries, Japan and Italy, are disappointed. And it is the story then next, if we talk about the Second World War, Japan and Italy will join anti-status quo, and they join Germany. Yeah, to try to change the order. Okay, this is the next story next week. Okay, let's see about Versailles here. About several idea about the Versailles Treaty, the League of Nations, territorial loss for Germany, the military restriction for Germany, and war killed. Yeah, the war killed is very hard for Germany. The sole responsibility for the war placed on German shoulder. Mostly German was, regarded as the responsible for the war. So I have to pay the Allies 33 billion US dollars in reparation over 30 years. They have to pay until 1950s. They have to pay. So very long. Germany have to pay. Okay, next, what's happened next after the peace treaty of Versailles? And then actually there are many problems in world politics. Actually, the context in general, the world is not in good condition, but there is several political condition where after the world is not getting better, but would be in crisis. That's why the title of our lecture today is the 20 years crisis. In Europe, for example, there are many countries where are under what we call unstable new democracy, and they fall into authoritarianism. For example, here in Russia, after the collapse of the Tsar Nicholas II, it was under the provisional government. Yeah, and it could be like democratic government, but it failed. Russia then 1918, the Communist Revolution, and then in 1922, the emergence of the Soviet Union under the communist dictatorship. So this situation is not good in Europe in general. And also in other part of Europe, for example, in Germany. And Germany was under actually not democratic government under the Kaiser, But then it began to a new democracy under the Weimar Republic. I mentioned about that later. Germany ruled under new democracy, and also in Austro-Hungary, the new democracy there. But every country in Europe mostly in a weak democratic government. And also including France, there's not a very strong democracy there because there's so many political parties in France. And Italy, in Italy then it's not weak, a very weak democracy, then they will emerge a fascist regime in Italy. So in Europe, after the First World War, condition is not good, let's see, in Germany first. In Germany, as I mentioned before, Germany was under the democratic government under the term is Weimar Republic. But the democratic government in Germany, it was a serious weakness from the start, because Germany has lacked a strong democratic tradition, and Germany has so many political party as well as minor party, and many problem here is because of the million of German people in Germany blame the Weimar government, the leaders, because of the defeats and humiliation after the war. So they are very disappointed with democratic government. You can imagine if the majority of people are disappointed, then the possibility of emerging of authoritarian or dictator will emerge. Then I will mention about the rise of Nazi, in Germany. Nazi is a right-wing nationalist extremist party in Germany. Okay, in 1930s, there's also a situation called the Great Depression. It's a very technical thing about. In general, this is depression, economic depression in the United States, but it then spread to the rest of the world, including in Europe. In era of Great Depression, because of many people lost their job and so on, and people are trying to blame the government, and they try to find alternative, extremist alternatives. And the rise of Nazi and the rise of fascism under Mussolini, Italy, is also because of many economic ills at that time. Okay, so this is what happened next. Every country, it's very problem, economic crisis. because we call the Great Depression. And response, many weak government in Europe, the rise of fascism in Italy. Yeah, the fascism emerged in the condition because they promise, they say, okay, because the economic condition is very bad, I promise to revive the economy. I will punish those responsible for our hard time, and let's restore our national pride. That's the message from the fascist leaders. And people accept this kind of thing because people are frustrated because of condition, because people are angered by the treaty, because of the economic condition as well. So that's why the rise of fascism in Italy. Okay, fascism in Italy. So the first, this is military and political movement. It emphasized on loyalty of the state and obedience to its leaders. So there's no clear defined program, but they have several ideas. What's the idea? The idea of fascism is a kind of nationalism, but extreme nationalism. Loyalty to one's country. Yeah, this is fascism. Yeah, they handle the salute, yeah, the fascist salute. Fascists believe that the nation must struggle, peaceful state were doomed to be conquered. So they have to struggle for nationalism. And they also pledge loyalty to the authoritarian leaders. Benito Mussolini, that emerged in the era of the chaotic condition after the end of the First World War. And Germany also the same. Germany, the rise of Hitler in Germany. And the condition in Germany is not good. You know, there's problem economics crisis because of Great Depression. And then one of the political party, the name is National Socialist German Party. Partai Jerman, Socialisme National, yeah, or Nazi. This is extreme ideology, similar like in fascism. This party emerged in the chaotic condition of Germany, and then led to the rise of Hitler, yeah, who then become the Chancellor, German Chancellor. Chancellor is like Prime Minister, yeah, because there's President was Paul von Hindenburg, and named Hitler as the Chancellor. Because it's actually this long story about this emergence of Nazi, but the rise of Hitler is actually legally. It's mean that it was appointed. He was appointed by the president, not become Chancellor. Okay, and in other country, there's also the rise of dictators. Yeah. The country in Europe, mostly in Hungary, yeah, after the brief communist regime, then military forces and wealthy landowner joined the Admiral Miklos Horthy. This is in Hungary, under the authoritarian rulers. In Poland, Marshal Joseph Piłsudski control the power. So there's no democracy in Eastern Europe. This is before the communism, yeah, it's still in the after the end of the First World War. In Yugoslavia, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania become under the authoritarian government, including Czechoslovakia in Eastern Europe. So only Britain and France and Scandinavia. So democracy only survive in this certain country. Jadi negara-negara demokrasi hanya beberapa gelintir saja pasca perang itu. Prancis, Inggris, dan negara-negara Skandinavia. But other country in Eastern Europe, southern part of Europe, including Germany and Italy, was under authoritarian regime. Okay, so then we will discuss next week about the outbreak of the Second World War. But before that, I mentioned here about the Germany and Italy who will become then military adventure of Germany and Italy as well as Japan. Next week I will discuss about this. But let's see here in democracy, Britain and France and the state was distracted by economic problems at home. So actually they hope for world peace. Yeah, they want to involve in many other conflicts. Yeah, in other conflicts, they are very concerned about economic woes in its own country, and also about how peace is only put on the League of Nations, responsible to maintain the peace. But later on, I mentioned here that the effort of League of Nations was failed, and fascism spread in Europe. All nations moved towards civil system. Actually, especially we talk about the Far East in Japan. Yeah, it was also fall under military rule. So again, in conclusion, that the era in the post First World War is not a peaceful condition, but it was in crisis in terms of economy. Then there's a crisis after the Great Depression, as well as in terms of politics. Many people, many countries in Europe was fall under authoritarian regime, including our focus is in Germany under Nazi, and Italy was under fascist regime, as well as in Japan was under the military rules. Yeah, and Far East in Japan. So this condition that we call the crisis or 20 years crisis. So think of our theory. If you talk about the theory in international relation theory, liberal theory, they are very optimistic. They are very optimistic. In the end of the First World War, they hope that the world will move toward a peaceful condition. They hope that League of Nations can solve the many problems and so on and so on. Democracy will prevail. But in fact, realists, one of the theory in IA, they see the fact that the world is moving toward another war because there's conflicts seem like, will break out again. Many problems, including Germany. Yeah, Germany was a country humiliated and had tried to kind of revenge again what has been, yang telah dialami pasca Perang Dunia Pertama. Okay, I think that's for our introduction. I close the PowerPoint here. If you have any comment about the history of the world politics after the Great War or the 20 years crisis. So please, if you have any question. That's the history of the beginning of the 20th century, the crisis in world politics. Yeah, unfortunately, we are mostly talking about Europe, but mostly the world politics is determined by the politics in Europe. So that's why mostly we still talk about Europe. Okay, any question? No? Okay, if you have no question, I have to inform you that we have a very long holiday after this. I think 3 weeks or more, yeah? Maybe 4 weeks, yeah. So next week we have no class. We have another meeting, another class after the Idul Fitri, yeah. So after 20th of May. So we have a long break. Therefore, okay for today. So see you again after the Idul Fitri. And okay, don't worry that the reading of our discussion is in my class, and also don't forget to your attendance, yeah, in my class as well. Don't forget about that. So you have no question? Okay, thank you very much. See you again after Idul Fitri, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome. See you again.